I'm going to take a break from rock acts for this playlist and talk about one of my favorite bands, Earth, Wind & Fire. If you're not too familiar with Chicago R&B band Earth, Wind & Fire, you might be scratching your head thinking, wait, the disco band that did Boogie Wonderland and Let's Groove Tonight? Why is the History of Rock guy covering that? But for those of you who are in the know about Earth, Wind & Fire's massive catalog, you know exactly why this band deserves to be talked about. In fact, early on, Earth, Wind & Fire took on a more progressive funk and jazz feel. They were amazing live performers. Their jams could rival any great jam band of the 70s. And their albums were finely crafted with interludes, themes, and universal messages, all helmed by their genius leader, Maurice White. Even when they, to their own admission, sold out during the disco era, they're still some of the best disco songs of that time with irresistible grooves and harmonies. There's a reason you hear them so often at weddings. But I'm not looking at those today, so you're not going to see September or Let's Groove or even Got to Get You Into My Life. I really want to dive into their catalog and show that there's so much more to this amazing band. So here is my playlist for my favorite Earth, Wind & Fire songs. Same rules as before, formatted like a vinyl record, 26 minutes aside, with 6 bonus tracks at the end. We'll start with their 1973 release, Head to the Sky, which was really the first to feature the classic Earth, Wind & Fire lineup. Brothers Maurice and Verdine White, Ralph Johnson on drums, Al McKay and Johnny Graham on guitars, keyboardist Larry Dunn, saxophonist Andrew Woolfolk, and the virtuoso vocalist Philip Bailey. His signature falsetto vocals are perfectly showcased on the title track, Keep Your Head to the Sky. A very spiritual ballad written by Maurice White, this song felt a bit more grounded than the more experimental Afro-jazz funk sounds of their previous records. Part of it is the simplicity of the song, while still maintaining that percussive feel. Keep your head to the sky. Al McKay's electric sitar is a real nice, subtle touch, not far off from the Indian textures that George Harrison would add on the Beatles records. But of course, Phil's voice just shines on the song, aided by those layers of gorgeous harmonies. I love how they isolate just the voices at the end, including just the highest harmonies for the very last chorus. Great track to start things off. Moving forward to 1975's That's the Way of the World, the first to be co-produced by Charles Stepney, let's groove with the song that practically made this band, Shining Star. When you wish upon a star, hey, dream to take you very far, yeah. Full disclosure, the first time I ever heard the song, at least as far back as I can remember, was on Seinfeld during Elaine's infamous dance. But hey, you can't blame someone for wanting to get up and dance when the song is playing. From the minute those twin guitars kick things off in a riff that would rival Stevie Wonder's Superstition, the groove is irresistible. Funk of the highest order. And those horns, I mean, damn. I also love the way it uses both Maurice and Phil's voices in kind of a Sam and Dave sort of way. And for those who prefer the more progressive jazz style of EWF, there's a fantastic instrumental break with some smoking guitar lines from Al McKay. And this leads us perfectly into not just one of my favorite Earth, Wind & Fire songs, but one of my favorite songs, period. That's the Way of the World. Interesting enough, this was paired with a film of the same name starring Harvey Keitel and the band themselves. The film itself didn't gain too much traction, but the album sure did. The title song is just gorgeous. Co-written with Charles Stepney, Maurice has said how instrumental his influence was on finding their new sound. He was kind of like their George Martin in that regard. And the arrangements just tug at your heartstrings. Not as flashy as Shining Star, but plenty of emotion. Maurice is the lead singer here, and as amazing as Phil is, I really consider Maurice to be one of my favorite R&B singers. You can really hear the passion in his voice and his connection to the lyrical content.
I think there is one line that has always stood out. Children are born with a heart of gold. The way of the world makes his heart grow cold.
Child is born with a heart of gold. Anyone can identify with that, but yet the song is so uplifting in that pure gospel sense. Also, give your love to Johnny Graham for that tasty guitar solo. Sing a Song, written by Al McKay with lyrics by Maurice. You can pretty much count on Maurice writing almost all their lyrics.
He'd be in the bathroom combing his hair or something, and he would hear it, and he'd just start singing something. The first song that we wrote together was Sing a Song.
This is the point where you start to hear a little of that early disco influence seeping into their sound, but it's welcomed. It's a nice sentiment. When you feel down and out, sing a song, it'll make your day. And Verdine really digs into his bass for this track. Don't really have that much else to say about it. It's just a fun song. Though curiously, it's on a mostly live album called Gratitude, and if you're looking for that progressive jazz feel, you'll find it on this album in spades. In fact, I actually prefer a lot of these renditions to their studio counterpoints, Reasons being a great example. Originally from That's the Way of the World, this song is pretty much just a showcase for Phil's insane vocal range. Seriously, there's some notes he hits in the song that don't even seem humanly possible. Wow. I also like the more raw feel of this version. It's not as overproduced and has an elongated sax solo by Don Myrick. And since Phil practically uses his voice like a horn itself, there's some great interplay between Phil and Don to close out the song and the first side of this playlist. We'll come back to Gratitude in a bit, but let's kick off side 2 more upbeat with Getaway, not written by Maurice White, I know, shocking, but co-written by R&B singer Beloyd Taylor, who had actually joined the band on stage at one time. The arrangements in this are just wild, the harmonies, horns, those syncopated hits, it's such a jam. And lyrically, the transcendental theme fits with the title of the album, Spirit. Sadly, this would be one of the last tracks co-arranged with Charles Stepney, as he would die of a heart attack while they were producing this album. But according to Maurice, his influence would live on, and their success would only expand. Going back to Gratitude for a minute, let's check out another studio cut called Can't Hide Love, a cover of a Skip Scarborough song. I forgot how much this song influenced my own number, Shake It Off, which makes complete sense. I was so into EWF when we cut that track. There's something about the vibe of this track. It's so sensual the way Maurice sings it. It's what we jokingly call baby-making music. Every time those horns burst in, you just get a surge of energy. The dynamics just kick ass. So we're gonna move on to my favorite album of theirs, All in All. And seriously, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. I put it up there with Abbey Road, no joke. And again, part of what I love is just how perfectly the track listing is crafted. So to give you a good example of this, I'm going to include the first 4 songs without interruption, although one of them is actually an interlude. Serpentine Fire, another favorite of mine. Kind of an esoteric concept with its roots in yoga.
Serpentine Fire was probably one of those songs that nobody understood but Maurice.
But I've always interpreted it to have that kind of sun goddess quality to it. I see your face like a morning sun, ignite my energy. It's a song I often play when I'm working out or running. The inspiration for this album came out of a holiday Maurice took in South America. That's probably why you hear a lot more Latin percussion all over it, and it makes for a hell of a groove. I love in the breakdown when you get to really hear that cowbell.
I gotta have more cow.
It's like a little jig in and of itself.
That sounds like a little bit of Serpentine Fire.
I wasn't sure exactly what instrument that was, and believe it or not, I heard from Ralph Johnson himself, who said it was actually a Syndrum, one of the first electronic drum synthesizers that was very popular at the time. This leads us into another one of EWF's most loved classics, Fantasy, which according to Maurice was inspired by the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Take a ride in the sky on a ship fast aside.
Again, this song just showcases how much of a virtuoso singer Philip Bailey really is. Also well balanced with Reese's lower vocals. The way he comes in during the bridge is one of my favorite parts. But the arrangements are just otherworldly. You really do feel like you're going to be going up in the spaceship with them. And an epic key change gives Phil the chance to really strut his stuff vocally. We then dive into the first interlude of the album, In the Marketplace, showcasing Maurice's kalimba, always a unique texture to the early Earth, Wind & Fire albums. This is where the Brazilian influence becomes more apparent. And then we got Jupiter, and I'm just gonna say it, these are the most badass horns ever captured on tape. Hell yeah! God, I love this song so frickin' much. Keeping with that space exploration fantasy theme, this may very well be my favorite upbeat Maurice vocal. He just gets so into it, and Phil's certainly no slouch on the song either. And it's got all the hallmarks you want. Funky guitars, Verdine's moving bass, ethereal harmonies, progressive arrangements, and man, this is just the first 4 songs. The album just keeps going. If there is an issue with this album, though, I'd say Earth, Wind & Fire was never able to recapture this creative peak. While they had hits, you already know how big September and Boogie Wonderland were, but it seemed like a further cry from these more progressive songs with profound messages.
I think it was starting to bug us a little bit. We started feeling that we were selling out a little.
However, on the 1980 album Faces, which Maurice actually cited as his favorite EWF record, they returned to the more experimental vibe with political messages of unity and uprising. While I was listening to this album again, I wasn't sure if I wanted to include Let Me Talk and Love Goes On, Back on the Road, which features Toto's Steve Lukather on guitar, but the one that really got me going was the 3rd track, Pride. Just the title itself harkens back to the themes of the early albums, as does the music with those blaring horns, funky guitars, and bluesy vocals. Maurice even busts out his kalimba for a cool solo at the end. There's still a bit of that Vegas-style vibe to the album, but it's well balanced. Faces is really the last of the great EWF albums, and probably the best place to stop before the band would get into their electronic period in the early 80s. When I finished the playlist, I noticed I had a little bit of time left, and since Earth, Wind & Fire has plenty of short interludes to choose from, I'm going back to All in All to include this gem, Brazilian Rhyme Bayo. This song is just a damn tease. It builds up to arguably the funkiest groove they ever came up with, not to mention some of Verdine's best bass playing, and then barely a minute into the song, it fades out. What the hell, Earth, Wind & Fire? There is actually a longer version of the tune, but honestly, it's not as good. I think it was a creative idea to just include the best part of it, the outro. Anyway, that's side 1 and 2, and for our bonus tracks, we're gonna dive into some of their live stuff. As I said, Gratitude is such a great live album, and it comes out of the gate with an intense medley of an early jazz track called Power, and another instrumental from That's the Way of the World called Africano. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but those horns are just legendary, with Andrew Woolfolk's saxophone leading the charge. And as a rhythm guitar player, this is as funky as it comes, with another smoking guitar solo. Sun Goddess was originally a single for Ramsey Lewis, who Maurice originally drummed for, this time with Earth, Wind & Fire backing him up. And yes, I said single. Back then, an 8-minute instrumental could be a radio hit. Ramsey's not on this live rendition, but it's no less funky with Maurice and Phil's chorus sandwiching some fine solos by Andrew and Larry Dunn. Now we can return to the studio cuts, including the title track to Spirit, written by Larry Dunn. Man, you want to talk gospel? This number doesn't hold back the spiritual vibes at all. These vocals are beautiful, and this was the song they were going to track the day Charles Stepney died. As such, it's dedicated to his memory and a wonderful tribute to him. Yeah, I'm going back to All in All, sue me. I can't leave off another groovy instrumental called Runnin'. It's not quite an instrumental since Phil is singing on it, but it's non-verbal scat singing and really shows off the dexterity of his voice. I also love that What's Going On style interlude with Serpentine Fire playing on what sounds like a radio. It just adds character to this record. It's like you're there in the studio with them. And since we haven't included anything from I Am yet, we'll include 2 back-to-back tracks. After the Love Is Gone is one of their most famous ballads, sung by Maurice. This is actually one of the songs we played for Jimmy Carter's 85th birthday celebration. Guess he's a big Earth, Wind & Fire fan. It's a beautiful tune, but what I really love is the transition between this and the next track. I remember buying After the Love Is Gone as a standalone track on iTunes, hearing that funky percussion come in at the end and then get cut off abruptly, and wondering what the hell it was. Well, one day curiosity got the better of me, I bought the whole album, and I was not disappointed by the track it goes into, Let Your Feelings Show. Like a lot of songs in this album, it's a bit more disco-y, but it's cool disco, and progressively gets funkier as the song goes on. A good message to end this playlist as well. As always, there's a link to this playlist in the description below. And by the way, if you haven't followed me on Spotify yet, please do so. It really helps me out a lot. What are your favorite Earth, Wind & Fire songs? What's your favorite Earth, Wind & Fire album? Comment below. As I mentioned in the last video, I'm going to start polling my Patreons on what they'd like to see next for these playlist videos. And as you can see, David Bowie is the next one. I gotta get Todd Meredith on that one. And a special thanks to my Patreon followers. Everyone please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.